So the first question I have is, how was your life growing up, and did you have any mentors, and who really inspired you whenever you were growing up?
Um, Not really technically any mentors. I just a little bit of background on it, since a lot of people don't know. I grew up in Shreveport, down in Louisiana, just below Arkansas. But my grandparents lived in Louisville, so I'd go there all the time to visit. So kind of lived in between two worlds, between city there and country when I'd go visit them. Um, and I would have to say that probably if I was going to say anybody was a mentor, it would probably have been my grandfather, also my namesake. He was, Richard Russell, as everybody knew him by, but he was James Richard Russell Sr. Um, he was a really, really quiet man. We were unalike in a lot of ways. I'm the most outspoken and outgoing, male of the family, and even I'm a severe introvert. So that's the thing. But my grandfather taught me a lot about the difference between ownership and stewardship when it comes to land. He grew up on a farm there in Louisville. It oversaw 500 acres of his own. Once it was him and his five brothers, an original 2,500 acre plot got divided between them. And he never worried about it as far as a profit thing. He did what was smart and correct for the land at any given time. When erosion was an issue, we got out there and planted up acres of hardwood trees to help control erosion and things like that. And we'd be out there side by side with him, knowing he'd tell me full well, he's like, I'm never going to see these things come to fruition. If you're lucky, you might, but your kids will. So he instilled that notion of, you're not doing things for yourself, you're doing things for the future, and have to bear that in mind. And at his funeral a few years back, the pastor was trying to come up with a word to summarize him, and what they said repeatedly was steadfast. And I try to bear that in mind, because it was always, it didn't matter what kind of help you needed. If you asked, he'd be there. And he was that from everything I know, from a young age until he passed, which was in his late 80s. And he'd get out there and work just as hard every single day, doing whatever was needed by anybody. So.
Absolutely. So, in that upbringing, does that translate to your political life in terms of how you try to serve the community, and in what way, if so?
Well, I mean, it translated into life in general, as far as, like, you should try to help everybody. So it was really more a matter of, once you have principles, stand by them. Don't waver, but also don't be immune to scientific evidence. That was another thing I forgot to mention. He actually was a mechanical engineer. He graduated U of A when he was younger. So he was very educated, very well read, stayed on top of all that. And so that carried through with me a lot too. It was keep yourself informed, keep yourself engaged, listen critically to what's going on, give people a fair chance. And I didn't have any political aspirations of my own until later on in life, after I had gone through college and done some studying and everything. Of course, growing up, again, in Louisiana, the politicians that I was exposed to were Edwin Edwards and things like that, where some of the most corrupt in history. So it didn't necessarily have the most positive outlook on politics in general. But no, like I said, once I got a little bit older and went into college and everything, I had previously worked for the state medical board and for Arkansas Children's Hospital, as a physician credentialing specialist, and then as a medical staff coordinator. And that put me in a lot of the executive committees and things like that. And one of those committees was the bioethics committee for Children's Hospital here in Arkansas. And so I got exposed to a lot of the questions where they're running into, well, the legalities and the bylaws of what we got in place with the hospital are running counterintuitively against what the laws state or what the patient states. So how do we rectify these issues? And what I found was that a lot of the legislation that was passed, a lot of the regulations put in place weren't put in place with the scientific basis in mind. And of course, the other side of it, the medical, wasn't, it was just presenting facts. That's what science does. It's here's the best information we have at the time. But if you don't have people legislating and governing that have an understanding of that science, then you can't have policies that are actually in accord with what evidence-based reality shows. So that's when I really got into bioethics and thought, wow, there's a genuine need for this. So went to college initially, pre-med, got the solid biology, chemistry, anatomy, all that under me, and then switched over to philosophy for the rhetorical and the theoretical to understand the linguistics behind it. And the political and legal theory was when I really, really dug in and thought, wow, I started becoming more engaged in political discourse, from TV and online, and really started going, well, wait, this makes even less sense than I thought. People are really getting lost in the mix here. And so that's when I started debating it, was, during college years, early as 2005, things like that. But of course, life intervenes when you're trying to build a life, and you, as a college student, when the bills have to be paid, you don't really have time to mount a political campaign or do anything else. You could help and you can support, but that's it. And I just finally here, within the last couple of years, arrived at a place in life where, okay, our business is up and running and it's successful and it's growing, and we don't have to really worry about basic needs. I'm able to assist people through the business. I'm able to make sure that lives are improving there. And it doesn't take 80 hours of my time during a week anymore. I'm not having to burn myself at both ends. So it was just, it's time to do it, and there's really no more excuses for it, especially with today's current political climate. A voice of reason and someone who's not afraid to get out there and tell the truth and not mince words and not try to shroud a message and obfuscate what they actually mean, I think is something that we desperately need.
Mm-hmm. What are the most fundamental parts of what you believe in terms of whenever you are in office, if you win, what would be the most important things for you?
Sure. So I thought a lot about this since you sent me the questions, and it basically breaks down to 4 E's: economy, education, equality, and the environment. And there's the catch is they're not separate and distinct from each other. They're all equally linked. One, just taking a look at our state, we rank near the bottom in almost every metric. Our education system desperately needs an overhaul. Our teachers don't have the resources that they need. And I think that that's the one thing that really needs to be addressed to begin with. You can't have a functioning society if you're failing to adequately prepare the youth to engage in society. That's fundamental. That's the first thing that has to be addressed. Along with that, when you're trying to talk about the economy, and I don't want to jump subjects, but I know you were talking about the Green New Deal coming up. With the environment tying into the economy, you can have solid, good-paying jobs that are also beneficial to the environment. You have skilled workers and laborers who they've got a background in welding, they've got a background in concrete laying, whatever. You've got all these skilled tradesmen that have solid paying jobs and opportunities. I don't think they really particularly care whether they're working on a pipeline or if they're working on an interstate rail system that's going to be better for the environment, an electric rail system, high-speed rails, things like that. Putting that in place seems like, one, a better opportunity to build the economy, to provide sustainable jobs, because you're building infrastructure that has to be maintained, as well as you're putting in place infrastructure that allows greater access from rural communities to urban centers for cultural expansion, shopping, commerce in general, and also taken away from the reliance on expanding the highways and constantly doing that, and honestly just putting us in line with where the country's moving as a whole. And every initiative we've heard from the federal level is a move towards cleaner energy soon, and we should be ahead of that. We should not be playing catch up. This is the natural state. That should be a no-brainer. But it is a matter of reaching out to people and kind of educating them on the fact that you can have good jobs. The discourse and the rhetoric that has gone into this, that's demonizing these policies, is inherently false and misleading. You know, they're not mutually exclusive. They are intrinsically tied together. These things will benefit everyone and provide those jobs and economic progress and growth for everyone. So.
And you were talking about the discourse that's been going on, obviously, with the election and just in general in the past decade. It's increasingly gotten more politically divided. In our state, what is your plan to provide some sort of healing or to provide a better future for those that are worried about it?
Sure. No, the biggest thing to me is, of course, I grew up, just post Nixon. I still remember the Carter versus Reagan debates and all that kind of stuff. I'm old enough that that's still in my memory. I can remember an era when conservatives weren't as dogmatic in their thinking. Nobody was as entrenched. We believed in economy and economy, equality, growth, that kind of stuff. I think that really what needs to happen is we need to have a voice of reason that does reach across the aisle and go, hey, we don't have different values. We just have different ideas on how that's supposed to be achieved. That's it. We're not enemies. We need to start there and de-escalate and reestablish that the country, not even just the state, the country was founded on the principle of the common welfare. Now, that doesn't mean instituting welfare state, but it does mean ensuring that it is for the welfare of all, that it benefits everyone. And just reaching out across the aisle and letting them know that we're trying to do the same things. We all want to enshrine individual liberties and freedoms and First Amendment, Second Amendment rights. I know I've gotten some blowback. People are like, how can you call yourself a progressive if you're pro-guns? Well, first, the pro-guns doesn't exist. Pro-guns would be, welcome to America, here's your gun. That's not what happens. It's pro-Second Amendment, which is pro-responsible gun ownership. The Second Amendment provides for, legal gun ownership and everything like that. And especially in Arkansas, a state where you've got such poverty and natural resources, there are a not insignificant portion of the populace where owning a gun, a rifle, isn't simply a matter of Second Amendment and I want my gun. It's I have to go hunt because that's how I provide food for my family throughout the year. This is part of that. And it's easy to get lost in that when you live in one of the urban centers like Little Rock, Fayetteville, Springdale, that kind of stuff. It's easy to lose touch with the rural side of it where this is a fact of life. And again, I as I have said to other people before, I'm a gun owner myself. I have an AR-15. I have handguns. It's not anything that I feel is a problem. I also don't bring them to the grocery store when I go shopping. It's not, it's simply common sense gun laws. And like I said, that's one of those cases where, like we're talking about with the discourse, the nuance has gotten lost because everybody's worried about the big catchy soundbite, the flashy incendiary news headline, because it's all about grabbing the attention. And that's all well and good, and I completely understand that. I mean, history and music, I understand the need to grab attention to brand yourself and everything. But when it comes down to issues of protecting one another and ensuring each other's rights, there needs to be nuance. We have to actually be able to sit down and calm tempers and go, wait, we need to consider both sides of this. You may have noticed too. Like I said, I deliberately put the gray shirt and the purple tie. One being UCA, I wanted to go ahead and represent.
Absolutely.
Well, and the other side is honestly the purple is not a mistake or a happenstance choice. I don't. There's always this talk of the blue wave coming, or Arkansas is a deep red state, or all these things. No, we are inherently a purple country, state, country, everything. We are a country of differing ideas, and that's symbolically the purple is we need to recognize those differences and respect them instead of acting like it's one versus the other. Red versus blue is fine for Halo, but it doesn't work for real life. That's all it is. So.
I understand what you're saying, because there's always going to be about half or more or less of the population that doesn't agree with, if it's a two-party system, there's always going to be people that agree and disagree. So
Sure.
So is that the main goal of your campaign, is to be united, or?
If I had to say I had a main goal, honestly, and I've had this discussion with the volunteers. I started a volunteer group on Facebook, and just to have one going, and it ballooned from 4 people before this weekend to I think we're approaching 350 as of today. So it's growing rapidly, and I keep pushing on all of them. The campaign is obviously, yes, it is about me pushing to be governor and trying to get the word out. But even more than that, I want the campaign to be about re-engaging the voters and re-enfranchising people, because we talk about how divided the state appears and everything. Well, but if you look at the actual voter turnout, it's abysmal. We've got people that are so apathetic and so disconnected and so disaffected that they simply aren't engaged in the political process anymore. They don't feel like their voice matters. And whether that's by design or by happenstance, we could quibble about. Again, that comes down to a difference in ideology and methodology. But it doesn't change the fact that we need people re-engaged in civil discourse and in our political system from the ground up. You were asking about history. I know when that came acutely into focus for me. I can cite the exact moment was early on when Brexit was going on. They were having those discussions. I had the Scottish referendum on that, and I was watching the voting results come in, and they had a 98% voter turnout, and I was just blown away. Like it was just as divisive as anything we have here. You still had the maps popping up red and blue, but it was 98% of the populace showing up to make their voice heard. And I was just, why can we not have that here? That's what we're lacking. We need to have that every time. That should be the goal at all points, is to get out there and make your voice heard. So my overriding theme for the campaign is, regardless of whether I win or lose, whoever wins at any level needs to have a genuine mandate from the people, not simply from the people who were motivated enough to go out and do something. We need everyone to actually matter and have their voice heard.
Absolutely. So, one second. So going back to the Green New Deal, or like the environmental stimulation, just progressing towards the future, do
Sure.
you think, is your stance that the government stimulating that would be the best way to go, instead of, some would say, as opposed to like the trickle down economic strategy? Or...
Yeah, I live for trickle down. We're not going to go there. No, so it is a valid point, and it is one that's going to be a big point of contention between ideologies. My view of government is essentially to be the referee. The government should be involved to the point of making sure that the people that you are governing are protected. So in like a Green New Deal or something like that, you ask about government involvement. The government should be promoting these things. If a company wants to move towards cleaner energy and things like that and promote jobs, the government should work with them to provide not necessarily tax breaks, but tax incentives for putting that infrastructure in. Have them work with our university system to put actual plans in place to train the people they need for those jobs. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to sink government money into it or pay for it or give anybody some crazy notion of a free ride. I mean, you're paying your taxes. I would think you'd want to see a return on it. That's the thing. But it's the government's job, in my belief, to get in there and again, protect the people. Make sure that you don't have predatory practices going on. Make sure that the free market is genuinely a free market. Make sure that you don't have someone playing favorites or that somebody's getting the entire bid, and it levelize the playing field. That's the role of the government. When you see an inequality, the government is supposed to step in and fix it. That's the notion of equity and social justice. And again, that's kind of what's getting lost in the dialogue. So in reference to the Green New Deal and clean energy and everything else, do I think the government needs to step in and subsidize? To the extent that is necessary. But I think that the government needs to incentivize the free market to step up to the plate and make it a worthwhile investment in the future, so that we are, as again, working together to reach new goals and new ideas and solve these problems, instead of a complete hands-off policy where you end up with essentially modern-day oil barons running rampant. But we also don't need a system where the government steps in and takes control of the entire thing. I mean, that's just, when you hear about somebody talking about, I'm going to protect from the radical left, I haven't seen any evidence of a radical left anywhere in Arkansas. I haven't seen anyone screaming to seize the means of production. That's just not happening. So I don't, and the crazier part is, when we talk about restructuring corporate taxes, not personal, our taxes at the personal level, don't mess with. People need that money. Restructuring at the corporate level to incentivize them. That's mirroring the policies that we had under President Eisenhower. When we talk about trying to clean up the environment and protect the environment, that's the EPA was established under Richard Nixon. I would really love to see someone explain to me how Presidents Eisenhower and Nixon were radical leftists. Everything else aside, that just seems like I would love to hear that discussion and that explanation.
So I agree with what you're saying, because nowadays you hear a lot of things. You hear a lot of numbers being thrown around, especially with these plans like the Green New Deal or just plans in general. Whenever the other party wins, you hear the numbers, trillions of dollars, and you hear about the national debt. And what is your perspective on how that will affect our progress toward the future?
You're absolutely right in that the rhetoric becomes frightening. Again, with the background in science and mechanical engineering and things like that, numbers don't tend to frighten me off as much as some people. I'm used to big numbers. It's not a big deal. And that, just as humans, we tend to, when numbers reach a certain level, we kind of cease to conceptualize them. They stop having any meaning. So when somebody throws out, well, it's going to be $1 trillion or something like that, well, one, they're not talking about $1 trillion by this Friday. It's not, the common everyday thought is it's going to cost this much. You, me, the average person here in the state thinks in terms of, oh, well, that's the budget. I've got to have that now, this year. This is urgent. We're generally talking about stuff that it's this many dollars invested over this period of time into these different things. That breaks down into smaller chunks. It's implemented in stages. And the other part to look at is it's an investment in economic reform as well. So you can say we're going to spend this much money. Yes, but how much more money are we going to get back? How many more opportunities are we going to generate for people to benefit from doing this? If we spend $1 trillion on infrastructure reform and rebuilding and everything else, how many jobs does that create? How many home bills does that mean get paid? How many new cars does that mean someone now can afford to buy? Groceries, fast food, just going out to eat, luxury expenses. Putting that much money into the economy, historically, evidence-based, always pays dividends because that money is fluid. Those funds don't simply evaporate. They feed back into the system. It's the opposite of the trickle-down economic effect. When you actually, redistribute that among the people at the bottom end, they immediately reintroduce it back into the system, and the economy grows as a result. That every economic study that we've had that's got any kind of credibility will bear that out. So I can understand the numbers scaring people off, because they do. You get into numbers, especially when you put a dollar sign in front of it. Neil deGrasse Tyson can talk about billions of years and everything else, and everybody's like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. But if you put a dollar sign in front of it, people suddenly get sticker shock and have a kind of visceral reaction to it. It's like, it's okay. It's just a larger discussion we need to have. Again, it's not about the soundbite. It's about the nuance and educating people on how this actually plays out.
And in terms of, if I'm not mistaken, you have been a mental health professional. You've ran a mental health office, or?
I'm going to be very careful on this one, because that's been miscited. I am not personally a mental health professional. I do not have a licensure in mental health. I need to make sure that that's clear for everyone. My wife, however, did get her master's degree in counseling psychology from UCA, is a licensed professional counselor, independent, which is the master's level version of a clinical psychologist, which requires a PhD. She got that licensure. She graduated in 2010, and I forget exactly when the licensure went through. But we broke away and opened our own business in 2014 and started as a private clinic. And it was literally, she saw the clients, I did everything else. The scheduling, the billing, keeping the office running, all of that. And slowly we had another friend of hers who had gone through the program. It was like, well, hey, I'd like to see a few people on the weekends, on the evenings, things like that. All right, great. So we brought her on board. We changed over to a group, and I kept handling the scheduling and billing for both of them, no problem. And then eventually we added more, and now it's grown to where we have 2 LPEIs on staff, and LCSW. My wife did also she did just get her testing done. She will also become an LAC or an LPC, licensed associate, licensed professional counselor. So she'll have more acronyms behind her name. So we've got, like I said, 2 LPEIs, an LCSW, now another LAC, because we actually just added on another LAC LMAFT. He'll be joining the clinic shortly. An LPC that's with us, and a psychiatrist and a psychiatric APRN who also has a specialty in neonatal care. So she's able to take care of, mothers who are either, expecting near term or just postnatal, to ensure that any of the psychoactive drugs, any of the psychopharmacology doesn't adversely affect the fetus or anything like that, to make sure that they're safe and everything is protected. And even with scaling up to that level, the office, the billing, everything else has only expanded to now there's me and one person, my assistant manager. And it was literally, I handed him the cell phone because I have a bad habit of I'd answer it, whether it was going off at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And he's a little bit better about, these are the office hours and I will answer then. And I still handle the office emails, help with the scheduling, do all the billing, take care of the payroll. Kind of back to the taking care of people thing. My explanation to everyone is that the clinician's job, all of them, is to take care of their patients and their clients. That's it. That's all I want them to worry about. I want to make sure that everything else is covered so that they don't have to stress about it. I've got their telehealth taken care of, their electronic medical records, everything is done for them. They just let me know. And also we let them have full autonomy. You can set your schedule, whatever, and everybody gets the same deal. Everybody knows no one's getting paid any differently. Everything's above board. Again, things that I just believe are inherently correct to do. But I tell them, your job is take care of your patients. My job is to take care of you. I make sure the clinicians have as little stress as possible, are taken care of, and if they run into something that they need for one of their patients, you shoot me a text, shoot me an email, whatever it is, we will find the solution. And we're one of the other things is, as a clinic, we've always been, if someone calls us, and for one, you have to appreciate the fact that, of course, being in mental health, you don't hear from someone unless they're in crisis. There is an immediate need when you're talking to them. I've made a point from day one that if you call us, even if we can't help you, if we're not the right fit, if you have an issue that we don't have someone sufficiently trained in, or you have insurance that we can't accept, or any kind of problems like that, I will not simply say we can't help and hang up and that's it. I will get your number, I will get your email, I will whatever. And I'll reach out in the community of other providers and go, hey, I have somebody with these needs. Do we know anyone? And I'll refer out all the time, but I don't ever want to leave somebody hanging. They called in need of help. The last thing they need is to just be abandoned at that point. So, that's kind of a short on the business ethos end of it is much like the government side. It's you shouldn't have to engage in predatory practices. You should be working for the benefit of all. And we've had that ethos and we've been a very profitable business. So I don't think that it's an untenable position.
Absolutely. And do you think that there could be more done to help protect our communities in terms of mental health? And how do you think we could get to that if you think there's more to do?
So much. There's a lot that could be done. One is just simple access. I think that the COVID pandemic really brought to the forefront a lot of the inherent problems in the system that we have writ large, just systemic overall, but particularly in health. It showed that these limitations we had as far as, you can't do telehealth, you can't this. Well, suddenly with COVID, you have to do this for the protection of everyone. You don't want to further spread. So we opened up telehealth wide. Well, that meant that all of a sudden it didn't matter whether you were here locally or could travel to our office in Little Rock. You could be anywhere in the state and we can see you. That's not a problem. Getting word out about that, and again, back to the infrastructure kind of stuff, making sure that rural Arkansas has access to decent internet connection so that they can have access to a mental health practitioner. Those are things that kind of outreach really matters, but you have to, again, make them aware of it. My family, a lot of them, my father and my brother, nieces and nephews, a lot of them live up in Yellville in North Arkansas. Very, very small rural town. Actually, the cell phone we used to have, we'd lose connection before we got there. So we couldn't even call them to let them know we were in town until we switched carriers. So there are a lot of cases in there. They have a mental health clinic there in town that last time I checked, it's only open one day a week. That town feeds other smaller communities around it. That's the only access point. And even with a small population base, that's a lot of people to try to fit in on a single week. And I don't know how many clinicians they had running at the same time. So you're not dealing with a lot of client hours. So there's a definite need for outreach, and the newer technologies and the evidence from COVID that they can be used functionally really, I think, shined a light on that. And another big part of the mental health issue, or health in general, being the rates of opioid and synthetic opioid use that we have in the state, drug abuse overall. I think we need to really, really take a hard look at that and say, look, this is not a criminal issue. This is a mental health and a healthcare crisis in general. Sure, you've got the standard where someone got overprescribed painkillers and they just continue using them after they're no longer needed, and physical addiction. But we also see the majority of people that, get into substance abuse, even with drinking and anything else. The majority of the time it's because they're disenfranchised, they're disillusioned, they don't have any sense of connection to the community, they're isolated. we have to fix those issues. It's a failure on our part as a society to reach out and continue engaging with our neighbors. And rather than recognizing that and reaching out to them, what we've seen repeatedly is demonizing them and criminalizing them. And you don't criminalize somebody who's suffering a tragedy. You try to help them through it. And we need to kind of get back to looking at that and going, instead of how can we punish them for some perceived failure in their character, how can we help them to overcome it so that they can return to society and be productive and live a fruitful life, that kind of thing.
Do you support, do you support prisons being less privatized and more geared towards rehabilitation with maybe shorter sentences, especially for drugs? What is your stance on that? How we exactly approach those that are in prison or jail for those kind of offenses?
Well, one, like you're talking about, the prison sentences for drugs are a holdover, once again, from Nixon era, when we had the war on drugs and the demonization, and then got amplified during the Reagan era. We've sunk a ton of money into the war on drugs, and we're losing it on every front. All that money has been wasted when it could have been going towards helping these people and preventing rather than demonizing again. I think that the private prisons is actually part of a larger issue, if you don't mind me kind of going on a tangent for a moment.
Oh, go ahead.
One of the things when we're talking about the difference in ideologies and free market versus government interference on things with economic. For-profit prisons are another example of what's been a standard Republican playbook for a long time. They have systematically, that you can look back, and the standard playbook is on any program, defund it until it breaks, then blame the program for not functioning even though you didn't give it the resources to, and then privatize it so that someone can profit off of it. That's how we ended up with private for-pay prisons. That's what we're looking at currently with schools and charter schools coming up. And I've watched that repeatedly over my life, where it's just kind of become the standard of, we're going to change the rules to ensure that you fail, and then we're going to profit off of your failure. And that's wrong. That's predatory. Once again, that's not the government encouraging free enterprise. That's the government aiding free enterprise by creating a problem for it to solve. Free enterprise does just fine on its own, but in issues of criminal justice reform, things like that, again, that is not something that should be outsourced. That is something that should be handled in-house and fairly. The fact that we've got people who are in on nonviolent drug offenses serving longer sentences than rapists and pedophiles and stuff like that, that's unconscionable. There's no reason for it. Of course, I think you have to look at everything on a case-by-case basis. Every case has its own merits. You have to actually get into it. But when you have people who, again, nonviolent offenders, you've got somebody who's in jail because they were busted for the third time with marijuana in their possession. Especially in this day and age, where now in several states recreational is completely legal. Here it's legal for medicinal purposes. You have to take a hard look at, was this person being punished unfairly? What are we doing to them? And also within the prison system in general, you've got the basic notion in penal reform and all that in general. You have to get into the notion of, okay, is it the purpose of prison to punish, or is it the purpose of prison to rehabilitate and to allow to reintegrate? And again, I think that comes to a case-by-case basis. If you've got someone who, you're dealing with somebody that's a serial killer, or a serial rapist, something like that, a repeat violent offender, you are not likely going to reform them. That's simply not the case. And that is something that society has to be protected against. But if you've got somebody who's essentially in jail as a debtor's prison because they couldn't pay the fine that they were issued, and so that held them in contempt, and now they're in, and this was their third time, you're simply punishing them for being in poverty. That's not fair. That shouldn't be the case. And so I think we need to really take a hard look and reform how we handle that kind of stuff. Again, there should be compassion. You have to, I 100% agree, you have to accept the fact that some people are going to do bad things. And of course, the elephant in the room being that, we heard on TV forever, the immigrants are bringing drugs and rapists and all this. No, they're not. We have a word for the people that are bringing drugs and raping people. That word is criminals. They don't have an ethnicity. We need to treat that as such. That's part of that rhetoric that has gone way out of control that we need to get back in line. And those people that have been treated unfairly, we need to take a hard look and see about helping them so that they can reenter society. Especially somebody that's a nonviolent offender, they've served their time. We set the system up to where this is your punishment. Once you have done this, we have considered it done. You have paid your debt to society, and then they continue to be punished and they can't rejoin. That's not how it should be. I mean, give a person a chance to genuinely change.
From your perspective, are there problems with the police system, with the criminal justice system, and in terms of like how the police do their job? Because it was really brought to light in the past year, obviously, with the events in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So what is your perspective on that?
Well, I'll say it point blank. I have worked with police officers in the past, law enforcement in general. I've been a security guard before. I've worked closely with them. I will actually go ahead on this. I was gonna check myself, but I will go with this. I think that the all cops are bad that we saw come out over the summer. I think that again it's caught up in jingoism and a quick catchy thing. I think that all law enforcement services need to be looked at. I don't think that means that each individual police officer is bad. That's not a personal attack on the human being that gets up and puts on that uniform and goes out there and does their best to serve and protect. But you do have to look at the system in which they operate and the leadership that they're given and the guidance that they're given, because they have to perform their role within those structures, and that comes down to leadership. And I know that was, again, one of the defining points for me that made me go ahead and launch this campaign was when the Black Lives Matter movement hit and the protests were held, and you see National Guard and state police forming a military phalanx and advancing on citizens like they're a hostile force. That's not de-escalation. You see them gassing and using chemical irritants on medical aid stations, and it's not supposition. I had actual friends working those medical aid stations. I was coordinating them through social media and through text so that they knew where each other were and could coordinate their efforts to make sure they were safe, and so that they weren't splitting resources. And hey, they've got water over here. You could get with them and make sure everybody's okay and safe and help wash off. And then I'm getting pictures where they've doused all of that with chemical irritants and destroying medical supplies. That's illegal during wartime. That's completely unconscionable to do in against your own citizenry. That shouldn't happen. But the catch is, I do not blame the officers that were caught in the middle of that situation. They were subject to leadership that simply said, get out there and do this. And at any point, all it would have taken at any point is for the governor, the lieutenant governor, anyone in a position of authority to call or even to go out there personally and say, stop. We do not need to address it this way. Yes, there are bad actors within the protesters. We need to remove them. Work with the peaceful protesters to remove them. We saw video evidence of that from across the country, where the protesters would physically hand over the bad actors to the police officers. That's what we need to aim for. That should be the goal. It shouldn't be going out and attacking everyone. It should be, let's work together. Let's protect private property. Let's protect everyone's health and welfare. Let's make sure that this is going on safely and correctly. You have a First Amendment right to be heard and to engage in this protest. Doesn't mean you have a right to set fire to something in the middle of the street or anything else. That's abusing that right. But it also doesn't mean that you have to assault everyone just because of a few people. Again, we have a common goal on every side of the spectrum. The common goal is the betterment of all, the protection, the welfare, the promotion of the common good. You don't do that by assaulting one way or the other. So again, that's why I say the all cops are bad fell prey to the same slogan and soundbite problems that we have with everything else. There's a distinct and inherent problem with how policing is handled. But that is not to say that there's a problem with the officers that we have serving. They are good people who are trying to do a job that is life-threatening and high stress. We need to ensure that they have the resources to approach that job correctly.
Do you support people that advocate for the whole defund the police movement? Have been talking about like not necessarily completely abolishing like police departments, obviously, but really revamping them with a lot of mental health professionals and sending them out in different situations. What do you think about that?
I think that media latched onto the wrong wording. I think somebody misspoke one time and we're stuck with it. I think that defund the police is absolutely the wrong message. If I was going to say anything, it would be demilitarize the police. Recognize that they're supposed to be civil servants. They're not supposed to be a paramilitary force. I mean, we are entrusting them with the capacity to make life and death decisions on the streets on our behalf and for our protection. We do have to recognize that. That doesn't mean that every police force needs a tank in the garage. I mean, there are better ways to approach this. And there are other agencies to work with. I mean, I will say that I am speaking on this from a place where I'm simply not sure. I'm not in the position yet. I hope to be, but I know that the governor can access National Guard resources. If a local police force needs access to a tank, surely we can work something out with the National Guard to use one so that the people who are trained with it have access and can assist. That doesn't seem like a big reach. That seems like something where, again, we should be cooperating. So yeah, I would say that much rather than defund the police, I would say to demilitarize the police, and we have to have accountability. That I will say the one most egregious thing that I saw during any of it was when we had officers covering their badge numbers, covering their names. You're a civil servant. You're a public servant. That's you. I understand the risk. I understand that in this day and age, the chance of doxing and having something blow back on your family and your well-being is a genuine, credible threat. That's simply the reality that we live in today. But if you're going to go out there and represent as a public servant, you need to be fully willing to stand and go, this is me and this is what I'm doing. And, you know, for the officers that did approach on and that were unfortunately caught in the middle of having to go through with advancing on their fellow citizens, that's not something they should face prosecution over. They had to follow orders. This is and we've heard it before. I mean, I hate going there, but Nuremberg, how many times did we hear I was just following orders? It's a terrible defense, but when you are stuck in a position where you have a chain of command, it is where you are frequently, and you don't always have the time or the availability to speak your conscience and go, hey, wait, I can't support this. When you're already deployed and in full riot gear with your shield out, it's too late. That's the thing. So I think we need to make sure we have a place where officers do have the ability to speak their conscience and to question an order without repercussion. And that's not without precedent. We have within the UCMJ, Universal Code of Military Justice, all of our members of the armed forces. It's one of the core principles of you are bound to follow all legal orders from an authority figure. If you are issued an unlawful order, you are not bound to follow it. You cannot be held liable if you do not follow a lawful order. And I think that we can take a playbook. Yeah, we can take that as an example and use it to show that you can have a conscience and say, what you're asking me to do is unlawful and I cannot engage in this. And that should be a protected thing. That shouldn't be a problem, especially when, again, you've got people's lives on the line.
What is your stance on in the United States, obviously in the past 20, 30 years, we've had a lot of immigrants come from other places seeking a better life, especially South America, Central America. Would you be open to expanding access for those that have difficulty coming legally or haven't come legally, like people that are here illegally? What do you think about all that?
Absolutely. And unequivocally. The Statue of Liberty literally put out the welcome mat. Send me your poor, your huddled, your tired masses yearning to breathe free. That's right there on the door. So to say, no, you can't come here, that kind of doesn't work. You have to live up to your ideals. We heard all the rhetoric about, America being the shining beacon of light on the hill. Well, yeah, there's another word for that. It's a safety light. That's what people go towards when they're lost in the dark. So you can't have those kind of ideals and then say, well, yeah, but no, you can't come here. I'm not ashamed to say I've had manual labor jobs where I worked side by side with people who were here illegally, and they were some of the hardest working people I know. They were not criminals. Okay. By technical definition, they were criminals because by being here illegally, they've engaged in a misdemeanor. I will grant that much, but they weren't posing a threat to anyone. They were simply trying to seek a better life for themselves and their family. That's what everyone in this country wants, is a better, safe, stable life for their family. So, no, I think that immigration needs reform. I absolutely abhor what has been done with ICE and the detention centers and the stripping of children from their families. That's a shame that I don't think we're going to live down. That one of many in the country that we are going to have to face at some point. And it's going to be an uncomfortable discussion, and we need to get used to having uncomfortable discussions. That's all there is to it. But when it comes to immigrants, we need to have a system in place that makes sense, that is logical, that takes into account their humanity and helps them. If they are striving to reach the American ideal, the American dream that everybody always talks about, we should be helping them, not demonizing them. That's how we were built. That's our country's basic principles. So that's where I would be on that. And I will say, having said that, I worked with illegal immigrants, I have also worked with legal immigrants, and equally as well. I have the good fortune of being barely bilingual. I'm passable in Spanish. So a lot of times when I'm at a job where we would have Hispanic or Latino communities coming into work, I would be the only one to communicate with them at any level. And people would point at me and go, just talk to him, because that's the only way we can get it. And one job in particular, we had a gentleman that had, was a young man, probably about your age, but this has been several years back. He had immigrated from Venezuela, and he started the job and didn't know that I spoke Spanish at all, and just assumed everyone knew he did, because why wouldn't you? And the first time he saw them, or first time went over to me and heard me speak Spanish, his eyes almost fell out. He's like, wait, what? And I'm like, oh, yeah, we have someone more fluent now. We really need to use this. So, yeah, it's recognizing immigrants for they are essential resources. They're not enemies. We should be helping them. If you want to become an American, yeah, this may it's another one of those where I've kind of gone back and forth on whether or not to say it, but I will. Especially because of the friend that was from Venezuela that I talk about. He'd always talk about, everybody's going, "Oh, are you American?" Well, yeah, I mean, South American, but there's more than one America. That's just the nature of it. I was brought up in school and ideologically with the view that everyone who has our ideals is inherently American. American is not a state of where you live or a state of where you were born. American is a set of ideologies. It's a belief in freedoms. It's a belief in helping each other. It's a belief in the common good. Quibbling over citizenship is another matter. If you share that ideology and you're in this for the common good, we should be helping you. We should be on the same team, and we should be helping each other.
Do you support kind of the government assisting in people learning English and that kind of stuff, and further becoming more comfortable in this nation? What would be a good approach for that if anybody was struggling with that?
Oh, I mean, support with learning English, obviously, but I would also say support in making America more multilingual. There's no reason not to. Again, especially in the modern age with, you have no endorsement by any means, but you've got things like Duolingo and stuff like that out there. There's no reason not to learn additional languages. It benefits you. I'm going to kind of get a little bit, quixotic for a moment on this one, but as humans, we generally think in language. That's how we're encoded. That's part of it in developmental psychology. That's part of why we don't have memories beyond a certain point. And those memories usually kick in about the time that we're learning language skills. It's because that language encodes how we're actually building our thought processes. And so the quality of your thought cannot exceed the quality of your language. So going back to the education thing, if you're educating people more appropriately, the quality of their thought and the quality of their engagement in life will improve as a natural byproduct. And by extension, if you learn multiple languages, you learn different ways of viewing things. You look at the basic syntax structure, grammatic structure and syntax of Spanish or any of the Romance languages. You have your masculine and feminine and all that kind of stuff on them. And you go into Germanic, German, Deutsch, whatever, and you've got completely different rules regarding syntax within the sentence. Like all the words have to be in there, but it doesn't really matter what order they're in. I know people who have become fluent in German, and you genuinely have a switch that flips in your mind where suddenly your conception of the world changes. And not for the bad. It's not that you suddenly just adopt a different ideology. It's you gain a deeper understanding of where someone else is coming from. So I would absolutely support helping, anyone in need of language skills, not simply immigrants. I'm in favor of helping immigrants to learn English. I'm also in favor of helping anyone that's illiterate or undereducated to get the education they need. If you had to drop out of school to help support your family at some point, society has failed you. There's something inherently wrong. We need to make sure that person is not left behind. The No Child Left Behind ignored all the adults that were already left behind. We need to help. So no, I'm fully in support of additional learning resources for immigrants and people in need overall. It's not a problematic idea, I wouldn't think. And it creates more jobs. I mean, right there, you've got additional teachers now being able to get out there and teach language and people understanding each other and engaging that wouldn't otherwise engage. That's healthy for our democracy.
Mm-hmm. And I was also curious, what are your thoughts on the abortion and contraception debate? What is your viewpoint?
Okay, so I went to Catholic school for 10 years. I was raised Catholic on my mother's side, Methodist on my father's side. I now fall broadly on the spectrum of, religious beliefs. Different topic. When it comes to abortion and contraceptives and everything else. The easiest way for me to state it is that I am pro women's autonomy writ large across the board, whether it comes to their reproductive rights, whether it comes to wage inequality, whether it comes to their opportunities. Women deserve equal treatment, period. And I say women specifically because I am referring to of age, adult, consenting women, period. Now, I mean, that does include trans women because again, if that's what they identify as, that's fine. That's their right. But they deserve autonomy. They deserve the respect to make their own decisions about their own body and how they move forward. Access to contraception, I think, should be more widely available, because if someone doesn't, it again goes back to ignoring the basic human nature. We are who we are. We are biological beings, regardless of your views. You're younger than me. You've had to deal with hormones more recently than me. Those urges are there. To try and ignore them, and the abstinence-based teaching programs and things like that, they're routinely, and again, you have the research to back it up, they fail every single time. Access to contraception, that's a healthcare issue. I will stop just short of saying make it available over the counter when it comes to birth control and hormone, solely because I do believe that needs to be a consultation with a trained physician, because you're dealing with the endocrine system. You are dealing with something that is an ongoing, biological process. That's something that needs to be an informed decision between a person and their physician. Now, other contraceptions, as far as barrier methods, they're already out there. You go anywhere, it's not a problem. So really, when you bring up the issue of legislating contraceptives, you're really back to talking about women's health care. And that, again, that's a personal issue. That is between them and their physicians or trained medical professional of their choice.
Is there anything else that you would like to address the audience for, or anything like that before we wrap it up?
So one thing that I have had, and it may be kind of funny, but I'm just going to address it because it has come up so much. There has been massive consternation about, who's Russ? Because that's what I go by. And on social media, that's it. It's Russ with just one S, R-U-S. And there's this constant, wait, what? I don't understand. It says James Russell, but it's Russ. Well, yeah, I've been Russ as a person for decades. I've only been a political candidate for, I think, coming up on 4 weeks now. Usually when I heard James Russell, it was somebody that was coming with a bill. That was just the way it was. I knew it's the old joke of, you're in trouble when you hear your full name being called out. That's exactly what it grew up with. I have just hordes of friends that if you ask them if they knew James Russell, they'd look at you funny. And if you say, oh, no, Russ. Oh, yeah, no sweat. So that's just genuinely what everybody knows me as. I've even tried to change it on Facebook, and it won't let me. I at some point managed to verify that on Facebook, and now it's there. That's just it. That's one of the things is I would hope that people can understand that Russ is a nickname. Russ is who I am. That's how I want everyone to address me. As you've seen, I don't stand on formalities very much. But my full actual legal name is James Richard Russell III. Problem was, my dad goes by James, my granddad goes by Richard. They're common names. Every other nickname in the entire world based on those was taken by somebody in the family when I was born. So they had to call me something. And the ones that have known me the longest actually knew me as Rusty when I grew up. It was always Rusty Russell. And as I got older, got into high school, of course, high school friends and stuff, shortened that into Russ Man. Yay, hip, 90s, whatever, And, grew out of that phase, and the man hyphenation at the end just fell off. And so I was just left with Russ. And that's been it now for, ever. That's how everybody knows me. And that's why it's just one S, because it just lost the TY. That's it. And the other thing being, apparently apparently a lot of people have massive problems with my long hair and my beard. I have had it trimmed. It is not an issue. The first photo shoot, simply we scheduled it and had everything lined up, and I couldn't get to the stylist before the shoot happened. So we went with what we had. It was, and we'll have new photos coming out, but I do clean up nice. It's fine. If you're looking for unflattering photos of me, I was a musician for ages. It's not hard to find unflattering photos. So be my guest. Knock yourself out. I will enjoy sharing the memories of those times when and if you find them. So
everyone has had a time where they've had a bad picture, so it helps you relate to everyone.
Yeah, well, and it's a lot of it. Is people going, we need to humanize you. We need to really humanize you and make you accessible to people. And I'm like, I really don't know how to get more human. I've been out there just in the world, so and the other thing is just some people have already taken advantage of this. I've had anybody to contact me whenever. Obviously, as the campaign is picking up, it's getting harder and harder to keep up with contact. I know you and I texting and everything, and I invite you at any time to shoot me a text. That's totally fine. I'll be happy to answer. But I've had a lot of people shoot me an email or a Facebook message or a message through through Twitter, all kind of different stuff. And they're routinely shocked when they get a reply, and it's not from some PR person. It's not from an account manager. It's me. That is me typing them all up. That's my thing is I'm building volunteers, and we're starting to get that. And I have established with all of them, if it's part of the team that's making a statement on my behalf, there won't be a signature at the bottom. That's it. If it says Russ at the end of it, that means I typed that up. That's from me. There's no dodging it. And I'm not like some politicians who have said, mark my words and hold me to them, and then 4 years later want to act like they didn't say it. No, if I said it, it's out there. You can hold me. I'll stand by, and we can have a discussion about it. That's not a problem.
Absolutely. Where can people that are watching contact you? What are the best places specifically, like with the handles and all that?
So the super easiest is actually the website that we've got up, which is vote4russ.com. VOTE, the number 4, RUS.com. You can go to that website. It's got to contact me. It's got links to the social media, all that. We're going to update it here soon so that press inquiries have a specific email they'll go to. But for right now, the main form on the website comes directly to my laptop and my phone. I get those emails straight up. The one you sent from the website, that came straight to me. There's no middleman at this point. We're just not there yet. So I hope to get busy enough there is a middleman, but it's still going to be, if you get a reply that has my name on it, that's straight from me. That's all there is to it.